back out this morning, and I'm full of painkillers and whiskey now. Hey, what? Hey, listen. I'm going to take the full 2 minutes to do an intro. This is actually going to be a really complicated thing that I want to take you through. So it's going to take a bit of concentration. The first thing I want to say is I don't really care about who owns the water rights in New Zealand, and I don't really care about selling state assets. It doesn't, to me, it's just a silly thing, because what actually happens is we're just transferring the ownership and the value of something from one bunch of New Zealanders to another. And I think while we keep on concentrating on those sort of things, instead of thinking about nation building on a much larger scale, we're going to always wonder why we can't compete with Australia and the rest of the world. We seem to fixate on these internal things and don't think about what this country can achieve and what it has to achieve. My presentation is about an observation I've made about this country from the perspective of working in advertising, building brands on some major New Zealand companies. The biggest was our own country brand, 100% Pure New Zealand, which is probably the most satisfying brand you could actually work on and most challenging. The presentation started as a marketing exercise from observations I've made over the years. It is designed to try and turn a potentially huge problem, what I'm calling the $64 billion question, into a huge opportunity. The problem is that, like it or not, we will continue to grow and export food, largely commodity-based products, like Nick was talking about with milk. We've been doing it for over 130 years, and it isn't going to radically change. It is simply an accepted fact. The opportunity, as I see it, is to recognise that transforming the economy of our country isn't about transforming what we export. It's about learning from history and transforming how we transport it. As the presentation moves through, it will go from an area of my expertise into an area where I have zero credibility. And I mean zero credibility. But hopefully you'll see I've spoken to New Zealanders who do have the credibility to make observations. So let's start with some observations on marketing and marketing New Zealand that help set a context for what I'm proposing. Okay, Fabio, thank you. Firstly, our own tourism brand. It is a brilliant, single-minded proposition. This campaign is recognised globally as the benchmark for country branding. However, in the world of global brands, it's a small budget, 85 million compared to, say, a global toothpaste manufacturer who spends $1.6 billion. Secondly, they say that a brand is a promise kept. There's a thing called dissonance. That's the gap between what you say and how you act. We don't want dissonance. We need everything to be in sync. If we say one thing and act differently, it's very dangerous. That's critical now because advertising is nowhere near as potent as it used to be. It's been overtaken by word of mouth. That's because word of mouth is turbo boosted by the potency of social media and can do great things. It can turn consumers of your product into raving advocates, like Whittaker's. By staying true to themselves, they've won an army of fans who recently voted them New Zealand's most trusted brand. On the other hand, this is dissonance. Palm oil, jobs exported to Australia. There is a gap between this behaviour and an ad campaign called Joyville. It is also reflected in the sales figures, which continue to decline in favour of Whittaker's. Only a few years ago, Cadbury was New Zealand's most trusted brand. Now it doesn't rate. The last context setter is this. A symbolic act is far more potent than advertising, and a lot cheaper. I contend that the underpinning of the success of 100% Pure New Zealand was the Nuclear Free Act. It sent a powerful signal to the world. Yes, we have 100% pure geography, but also 100% pure spirit and morality. So before I dive into the $64 billion question, here are the key drivers of building the brand of New Zealand. We have a small advertising budget. How we act is more important than what we say. Word of mouth builds and kills brands, and symbols of action are powerful. My question is, how do we reconcile two massive divergent trends? The first trend is global warming. It's an accepted fact. As I speak, the world is getting warmer, and it's warmer for the frog sitting unsuspectedly in the pot on the stove. Soon the world will switch from the financial crisis to this crisis, leaving countries furthest from their markets vulnerable to things like food miles. The second trend is that there is a greater financial return for fresh rather than frozen food. That means air transport, and that creates further image problems. A 747 travelling for 10 hours burns 150,000 litres of fuel. These two trends are roadblocks to our future wealth. Leaving them alone won't help, but answering them could place us in a brilliant position. A little history lesson. Over 100 years ago we designed the coat of arms. The sheep represents farming, wheat is agriculture, and the ships equal trade. Nothing has changed, and we need to accept that 1,000 Knowledge Wave conferences aren't going to redesign this. We are primary producers from the land. Another history lesson. This is the ship Dunedin. It transported frozen sheep carcasses to the UK. In that single act, the New Zealand economy was transformed. We went from exporting the wool off their backs to exporting the lot, and we became the richest country because of it. Simply put, the answer to any future wealth of this country isn't in changing what we produce, it's take a leaf out of our history and change the way we transport what we produce. So now imagine you're in San Francisco and you look up in the sky, a sky that's only ever held birds, helicopters and jet planes, and you see something you've only ever heard about from a country you'd heard pioneered a revolution. You see this. Yes, an airship, but an airship that used no fossil fuels to get there. Sailing high above the clouds, solar power has got it there. I think it's possible, and I think we need to explore ways to do it. Boeing and NASA are just two organisations exploring airships, because they know they hold the key to a global, green, efficient transport system. We should look at linking up as a country partner. We could share the R&D and the intellectual property, and potentially share the build, thus creating a high-tech industry that we will profit from. To be the first country to actively embrace and pursue airships sends a powerful message. It says we are deeply passionate about redefining our commitment to the environment, to technology, and to simply daring to do something first. What we don't want to do is join a queue and come second. There simply is no advantage in coming second. I believe we have the intelligence and the ability to do this. We have a global reputation for high-tech yacht building, we have a fledgling aviation industry in Hamilton, and we have a reputation for taking on and winning things that would defeat bigger countries. I know I'm getting into an area that no ad man should go, so I've spoken to some people with a bit more knowledge than me. Firstly, Tom Schnackenberg. Tom is a globally recognised genius who is the go-to man for anything to do with the physics of sailing. Tom is currently involved with a group who are looking at propelling cargo ships with giant spinnakers. He is intrigued by the idea of airshops utilising the trades, the winds that sit way above us. Brendan Kays is a graduate of Auckland University. When solar energy becomes ubiquitous because it is cheaper than petrol, there is a good chance he will have cracked it. Brendan is resident in California, working for the hottest energy startup on the planet. I've corresponded with him about skinning the entire ship with highly efficient solar cells, and he is excited by the possibility. So we started with a bit of a theory on marketing our country, about the shifts that are going on and the trends that have always been there. But classically with marketing, the best way to answer these issues isn't with more communications. It always starts with a product that answers the consumer's needs. Is it the right product? I'd like to think it is worth at least exploring. It may not be an e-ship, it could be some other as yet untried solution. To not at least try and find an answer to the $64 billion question is to give up. Give up on the planet, put our trust in someone else to solve one of our greatest challenges. Somehow that just doesn't seem right. Because this country has never shied from a challenge, I put this together to start a debate. Hopefully it will, but hopefully the words will rapidly turn into action. Thank you. Good night.